I used to believe that grief was the only thing that could truly break a family. Until I saw the paperwork. My grandmother left me an estate worth nearly $7 million, and my mother decided to sue me for it before the funeral flowers had even wilted. Standing in that sterile attorney's office, watching her eyes turn cold, I realized she did not see a daughter anymore. She just saw the one obstacle standing between her and a fortune. The rain in Hollow Creek did not wash things clean. It just made everything heavy. I watched the water streak against the passenger window of the town car I had hired from the airport, blurring the familiar, jagged tree line of the Massachusetts pines into a smear of dark green and gray. I was 33 years old, a project manager with a terrifyingly organized calendar and a condo in Chicago that smelled like vanilla and glass cleaner. But the moment I crossed the town line, I felt 12 again. I felt small. I felt the familiar low-level hum of anxiety that always accompanied a return to the orbit of my mother. Diane. I was coming back to bury my grandmother. Evelyn Brooks had been the one person in my family who understood that silence could be comfortable, not just a weapon. She had died in her sleep at 82, leaving behind a sprawling Victorian house on a hill that had always felt too big for just one person. A collection of porcelain birds I used to terrify myself with as a child. And, I assumed, a modest amount of savings that would likely just cover the funeral and perhaps pay off my mother's credit cards. I did not expect the war. The funeral service was a blur of damp wool coats and the smell of lilies, which I have always found cloying and suffocating. My mother stood at the front of the church, looking impeccable in a black dress that fit her a little too perfectly. Diane had always been beautiful in a sharp, angular way, like a diamond that could cut glass if you held it wrong. She accepted condolences with a tragic grace, leaning into the embrace of neighbors, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. I stood 3 feet behind her, the dutiful daughter, holding her purse. She did not look at me during the service. She only spoke to me when we were getting into the limousine to go to the cemetery. "Fix your hair, Lucy. You look like you just woke up." I smoothed my hair down. I did not say that I had been up since 4 in the morning answering emails so I could take this week off. I did not say that my grief felt like a stone in my throat, while hers felt like a performance art piece. I just fixed my hair. The reading of the will was scheduled for the afternoon following the burial. It was to be held at the offices of Marrow and Slate Legal Group, a firm that occupied a brick building downtown that smelled of old cigars and lemon polish. I expected it to be a formality. I expected to sign some papers, hand over the keys to the house to my mother, and fly back to Chicago to resume my life. Mr. Slate was a man who looked like he had been carved out of walnut wood. He sat behind a desk that was wider than my dining table, shuffling papers with agonizing slowness. My mother sat in the leather chair to my left, her posture rigid, her hands folded in her lap. She was already mentally decorating the Victorian house. I could see her eyes darting around the room, assessing, calculating. "Mr. Slate cleared his throat. "I am the executor of the last will and testament of Evelyn Rose Brooks, dated October 14th of last year," he began. His voice was gravelly. My mother stiffened. "October. That cannot be right. Mother wrote her will 10 years ago." "Mr. Slate looked over his spectacles. "Mrs. Brooks updated her estate plan 6 months ago. Diane, she was quite specific about it." I saw a flicker of something dangerous in my mother's eyes, but she pressed her lips together and nodded for him to continue. "Mr. Slate began to read. The legal jargon washed over me until he reached the assets. That was when the air left the room. "To my daughter, Diane Brooks. I leave the sum of $200,000 to be placed in a fixed-income trust managed by this firm, paying out a monthly stipend until the principal is exhausted." My mother let out a small, sharp sound, like a gasp trapped in a bottle. "To my granddaughter, Lucy Brooks," continued Mr. Slate, looking directly at me. "I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes the primary residence at 44 Elm Street, the commercial property located at 10 Main Street, currently leased to the coffee shop and the bookstore, And the entirety of my investment portfolio held at Vanguard and Fidelity. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. The total valuation of the estate passing to Lucy Brooks is approximately $6,800,000. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical thing, heavy and cold. I stared at Mr. Slate, sure I had misheard. 6 million. My grandmother lived on tea and toast. She wore the same wool coat for 20 years. Then, the silence broke. That is a mistake. My mother's voice was low, trembling not with sorrow, but with a fury so intense it vibrated in the mahogany desk. Diane, please, Mr. Slate said gently. No, it is a mistake. You read it wrong, or she wrote it wrong. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. She turned to me, and for the first time in years, she really looked at me. Her eyes were wide, panicked, and terrifyingly cold. You did this, she whispered. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the armrests of my chair. Mom, I did not know. I had no idea. She turned back to the lawyer. Correct it. Fix it right now. I am her daughter. I am her only child. You cannot give my inheritance to her. She lives in Chicago. She was never even here, Mr. Slate stood up as well. Diane, this is a legal document. Evelyn was of sound mind. We recorded the signing. There is nothing to correct. This is her wish. My mother slammed her hand down on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. It is not her wish. She was confused. She was sick. And you? She spun toward me again, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. You knew. You have been talking to her. You have been poisoning her against me. I stood up then, my legs shaking. Mom, stop. I have not spoken to Grandma about money ever. Not once. She laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. You are a liar. Lucy, you have always been a liar. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the office, the heavy oak door slamming behind her so hard the framed diplomas on the wall rattled. I looked at Mr. Slate. He looked tired. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I am sorry. Lucy, he said. Evelyn knew this would be difficult. Is it true, I asked? My voice barely a whisper. $6 million. It is true, he said. Your grandfather invested in pharmaceutical stocks in the 80s. Evelyn never touched the principal. She just let it grow. She wanted you to have options. Lucy. She told me she wanted you to be safe. I drove back to the house on Elm Street in a daze. The house was dark when I arrived, looming against the gray sky like a fortress. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer, the smell of lavender and dust greeting me. My mother was already there. She was sitting in the living room, in my grandmother's favorite wingback chair, drinking a glass of red wine. She had not turned on any lights. The only illumination came from the street lamp outside, casting long, warped shadows across the rug. Sit down, she said. I stayed standing by the doorway. Mom, we need to talk about this calmly. There is nothing to talk about, she said, her voice eerily steady. You are going to fix this. I walked further into the room. The air felt thick, charged with decades of unsaid things. Mr. Slate said the will is valid, I said gently. But Mom, I am not going to leave you with nothing. We can work something out. I do not need $6 million. We can share it. I can help you. She stood up slowly, the wine glass in her hand tilted dangerously. Help me, she repeated, the words dripping with disdain. You think I want your charity? That money is mine. Lucy, I took care of her. I was the one here when she fell last year. I was the one who drove her to her appointments. You were in Chicago, climbing your corporate ladder, too busy to answer the phone. I drove home every month. I said, feeling the old defensive reflex kick in. I paid for the new roof last year because you said you did not have the funds. She waved her hand dismissively. Details. You performed innocence. Lucy, you always knew how to play the good girl. You called her and cried about your life, didn't you? You told her I was mean to you. You made her feel sorry for you so she would cut me out. That is not true, I said, my voice rising. It is true, she shouted. You stole this from me. You stole my mother, and now you are stealing my future. I took a breath, trying to steady my heart rate. I am not stealing anything. Grandma made a choice. She was manipulated. She screamed. She was senile. And I will prove it. She walked past me toward the door, stopping just inches from my face. I could smell the wine on her breath. Do not get comfortable here, Lucy. This is not your house, and that money is not yours. I will burn this whole family to the ground before I let you walk away with everything I worked for. She left, leaving the front door wide open to the rain. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, listening to the old house settle, waiting for the anger to subside, but it only morphed into a deep, aching sadness. The next morning, I went outside to get some air. The rain had stopped, leaving the world damp and cold. I was standing by the hydrangeas, staring at the peeling paint on the garage, when a voice called out from the hedges. She always hated those hydrangeas, said they were too thirsty. I turned to see Marion Keel, my grandmother's next-door neighbor for 30 years. Marion was a tiny woman with white hair cropped close to her skull and eyes that missed nothing. She was wearing a gardening apron over a thick sweater. "Hi, Marion," I said, walking over to the low stone wall that separated our properties. "Thank you for coming to the service yesterday." Marion nodded, pulling off her gloves. "Your mother seemed spirited. That is one word for it," I said. Marion leaned in closer, her voice dropping. "Listen to me, Lucy." Evelyn knew this was coming. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "About a year ago, she started changing things, locking doors she used to leave open, buying a shredder. She had Mr. Slate come to the house because she did not want to go to the office where people might see her car. Why, I asked. Marion looked toward the house, as if checking for listening devices. She told me Diane was asking for things, asking for signatures on papers she did not let Evelyn read. Evelyn was scared. Lucy. She was organizing things like she expected a fight. A chill went down my spine. Did she say what kind of fight? She just said she had to protect what was left. Marion reached out and patted my hand over the cold stone. "Watch your back. Honey, your mother has been telling people in town that you abandoned Evelyn. She has been planting seeds for a long time." I went back inside, feeling the walls closing in. I spent the next few days trying to sort through the physical clutter of my grandmother's life, hoping to find some logic in the chaos. I found receipts for groceries, letters from cousins I barely knew, and stacks of old magazines. I found nothing that explained why she had cut her only daughter out, other than the money itself. 7 days after the funeral, the doorbell rang. It was a process server, a young man, barely 20, chewing gum. "Lucy Brooks?" he asked. "Yes, you have been served." He handed me a thick envelope and walked away before I could even say thank you. I opened the envelope in the hallway. The legal header at the top was bold and aggressive. Diane Brooks versus the estate of Evelyn Brooks and Lucy Brooks. I scanned the document, my stomach turning over. The phrases jumped out at me like physical blows: undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, fraudulent inducement. The complaint was polished, vicious, and completely fictional. It claimed that I had used my business acumen to confuse an elderly woman. It claimed that I had isolated Evelyn from her daughter. It described me as an opportunist who had preyed on a vulnerable senior citizen. It was a lie, but reading it in black and white, legally formatted and stamped by the court, it felt terrifyingly real. I did not call my mother. I called a recommendation Mr. Slate had given me, a woman named Nora Hensley who specialized in contested probate. Nora's office was in the next town over, in a modern glass building that felt like a sanctuary compared to the dark wood of Marrow and Slate. Nora was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and a suit that cost more than my car. She listened to me for an hour, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Her face unreadable. When I finished explaining the lawsuit and the confrontation, Nora set her pen down. "Lucy, you need to understand what this is," she said. Her voice was calm, almost soothing. but her words were sharp. "This is not a legal argument. This is a shakedown." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Your mother knows she probably cannot win a trial. Proving undue influence is incredibly difficult, especially with the precautions Evelyn took. But Diane does not need to win a trial. She just needs to make your life so miserable, so public, and so expensive that you agree to settle just to make it stop." I felt a lump form in my throat. She is my mother. She wouldn't destroy my reputation just for money. Nora looked at me with a pitying expression that I hated. "In my line of work, Lucy, I have seen parents sue their children for much less. This complaint was written to shame you. It will be public record. The local papers will pick it up. She is counting on you being too embarrassed to fight." I looked down at my hands. "I do not want to fight. Then you have already lost." Nora said, "If you settle now, you validate her narrative. You admit that you did something wrong, and she will control the estate." "Is that what Evelyn wanted?" "No." I said immediately, "Grandma wanted me to be safe. She wanted to protect the assets. Then we fight." Nora said, "But you need to be prepared. They are going to come for everything. Texts, emails, medical records. They will try to paint you as unstable and manipulative. You need to find anything Evelyn might have left that explains her reasoning. We need evidence of her intent." I went back to the house on Elm Street with a new mission. I was not just cleaning anymore. I was hunting. I started in the study. I went through every drawer, every file. I found tax returns from 1998. I found Christmas cards. But I found nothing that spoke to the will. I moved to the bedroom. I searched under the mattress, in the closet, in the pockets of her coats. Nothing. It was late in the afternoon when I went into the kitchen. I was wiping down the counters, feeling a wave of hopelessness crash over me. Maybe Diane was right. Maybe I was just an interloper in a history I did not understand. I pulled open the junk drawer next to the sink, the one every house has, filled with rubber bands, batteries, and takeout menus. I dumped it out onto the counter. Sifting through the debris, at the very back of the drawer, taped to the underside of the wood so you would never see it unless you took the drawer completely out, was a small silver key. My heart hammered against my ribs. I peeled the tape back. Attached to the key was a small scrap of paper, folded into a tight square. I unfolded it. My grandmother's handwriting was shaky but legible. "If they come for it, you will need the truth." I stared at the note. She knew. She absolutely knew. I looked at the key. It was small, like a diary key or a lockbox key. I remembered seeing a small fireproof safe in the back of the linen closet upstairs, buried under heavy winter blankets. I had ignored it earlier, assuming it just held birth certificates. I ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. I threw the blankets onto the floor and dragged the heavy metal box out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the slot. It turned with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid. I expected stacks of cash. I expected jewelry. I expected a diary. Instead, the box was almost empty. There was a single sheet of paper and a manila envelope. I picked up the paper first. It was a contract for a storage unit at a place called Pinewick Secure Storage. Dated 3 months ago, the contract was not in my grandmother's name. It was in the name of a company, Harbor Fern Holdings. I frowned. My grandmother did not own a holding company. She was a retired librarian who grew hydrangeas. I looked at the manila envelope. It was unsealed. I slid the contents out. It was a handwritten inventory list. It listed mundane things. Box 1, medical evaluations. Box 2, emails, 2020 to 2025. Box 3, property appraisals. My eyes scanned down to the bottom of the list. There was one final item, written in thick, underlined ink. Item 4, video. I stood there in the hallway, holding the paper, the silence of the house pressing in on me. A video. My grandmother had recorded something, and she had hidden it under a shell company in a storage unit, protecting it like a nuclear secret. Marion's words echoed in my head. She was organizing things like she expected a fight. I looked at the note again. "If they come for it, you will need the truth." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email notification from Nora. Subject: emergency motion. Diane's lawyers were filing to freeze the assets immediately. They were trying to cut off my access to funds before the battle even began. I looked at the storage contract in my hand. My mother wanted a war. She wanted to bury me in paperwork and lies until I gave up. She thought she was fighting the daughter who used to cry when she was yelled at. She did not know I had the map to the bodies. I put the paper in my pocket, locked the box, and stood up. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but beside it, something else was starting to grow, a cold, hard resolve. I was not going to let her rewrite the story. I walked downstairs, grabbed my coat, and dialed Nora's number. I found something. I said when she answered. "What is it?" Nora asked. "I think Grandma left us a weapon." I walked out into the cool evening air. The rain had started again, a slow, steady drizzle that turned the streetlights into blurry halos. I got into my car and looked at the address for Pinewick Secure Storage. It was time to see what the truth looked like. Pinewick Secure Storage was less of a fortress and more of a concrete bunker located 5 miles outside of town. Nestled between a rusting scrapyard and a pristine stretch of protected wetlands, it was the kind of place you went to hide things you did not want to look at: old furniture, tax records, secrets. Nora drove. Her car was a quiet, leather-upholstered sanctuary that smelled faintly of mint. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the small silver key and the contract I had found in the lockbox. My hands were cold. The landscape rolling by was gray and muted, the trees stripped bare by the New England winter. "Do not expect too much," Nora said, her eyes on the road. "Sometimes clients think they have left a smoking gun, and it turns out to be a box of sentimental greeting cards." I found an inventory list. I reminded her. It said video. "We do not know what is on it." "Lucy, it could be a video of her cat. It could be a birthday message. We need to manage expectations." I nodded, but my gut told me otherwise. My grandmother, Evelyn Brooks, did not rent a climate-controlled unit under a shell corporation named Harbor Fern Holdings to store cat videos. She did it because she was scared. We pulled up to the gate. I punched in the code from the contract. The metal gate slid open with a heavy mechanical groan. The manager's office was a small glass booth occupied by a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he had been part of the building's original foundation. He squinted at Nora's business card and then at my driver's license. "Harbor Fern Holdings," he grunted, tapping keys on a computer that looked 20 years old. "Yeah, Unit 402, paid up through next year." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He looked up at us, his expression shifting from boredom to mild suspicion. "You two have the key?" he asked. I held it up. "Yes." "Good," he said. "Because the code won't work without the physical override now. The system locked it down last week." Nora leaned forward, her demeanor sharpening instantly. "Locked it down. Why, Mr.?" Henderson turned the monitor slightly so we could not see it. A reflex of privacy. "Security protocol. We had 3 failed access attempts on the keypad. After 3 wrong tries, the system freezes electronic access until the owner comes in person with ID." Nora and I exchanged a look. "When were the attempts?" Nora asked. "Mr.?" Henderson squinted at the screen. "Last Tuesday, around 8 in the evening. I felt the blood drain from my face. Last Tuesday was the night of the funeral, the night my mother had cornered me in the living room and told me I was stealing her future, while she was screaming at me, someone else, or perhaps she herself. Later that night had been out here, punching numbers into a keypad, trying to get in. Who was it?" I asked. "Do you have cameras?" "Cameras overwrite every 48 hours unless there is an incident report." "Mr." Henderson said with a shrug. "And since they didn't break the lock, just got the code wrong. It's not an incident, just a lockout." He handed me a visitor badge. "You are good to go. Unit is down the hall. Second left." We walked to the unit in silence. The hallway was fluorescent lit and echoed with the hum of industrial dehumidifiers. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. She knew, I whispered. She knew about this place, or she suspected. Nora said, her voice grim. It means we are not just dealing with a grieving daughter. Lucy, we are dealing with a calculated effort to locate assets. If Diane tried to get in here, she knows there is something damaging inside. We reached Unit 402. I slid the key into the heavy padlock. It turned stiffly. I pulled the roll-up door open. The unit was small, perhaps 5 feet by 5 feet. It was impeccably clean. There was no furniture, no dust. In the center of the concrete floor sat 4 white banker boxes, stacked neatly in a 2x2 grid. That was it. I stepped inside. The air was cool and dry. I knelt by the first box. It was labeled in my grandmother's distinct, looping script, medical capacity. Open it, Nora said, pulling a pair of latex gloves from her pocket. She handed me a pair. We do this by the book. No fingerprints. I pulled the lid off. Inside were thick file folders. I opened the top one. It was a cognitive evaluation from Dr. Celine Maris, dated 6 months ago. Patient is fully oriented to time, place, and person. The summary read, cognitive function is above average for age group. Patient demonstrates clear understanding of financial assets and estate planning implications. No signs of dementia or cognitive decline. There were 3 more evaluations, each spaced 1 month apart. She got tested, I said, my voice shaking. She knew Diane would claim she was senile, so she went and got certified sane. 3 times. This is gold, Nora said, scanning the pages. This destroys the lack of capacity argument. What is in the next one? The second box was labeled correspondence. It contained printed emails and handwritten notes. I picked up a stack held together by a rubber band. It was a log of meetings with Mr. Slate, her attorney, June 4th. One note read, Diane asked for $50,000 for home repairs. I asked to see the contractor invoice. She became angry and left, called Mr. Slate to ensure the trust structure is unbreakable. I felt a wave of nausea. My grandmother had been documenting her own daughter's greed like a forensic accountant. The third box was labeled Harbor Fern Assets. It contained the deed to the commercial property and the holding company paperwork. Then there was the fourth box. It was lighter than the others. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was a single, large, padded envelope. It was sealed with red security tape, the kind that shows if it has been tampered with. On the front, written in thick black marker, were the words, "For court only if challenged." I reached for it, but Nora caught my wrist gently. "Wait," she said. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of the box, the envelope, and the seal. "Chain of custody," she murmured. "We need to prove we found it exactly like this." She carefully lifted the envelope. It had a weight to it. "We do not open this here," Nora said. "We take this back to my office. We open it on camera, with a witness. If this is what I think it is the nuclear option." We loaded the boxes into Nora's trunk as we drove away from the storage facility. I watched the rearview mirror, half expecting to see my mother's silver sedan following us. Paranoia, I realized, was contagious. The next morning, the war arrived at my doorstep in the form of a courier. I was staying at my grandmother's house, trying to keep up with my job in Chicago remotely. But my focus was shattered. The courier handed me a thick stack of documents, discovery requests. I sat at the kitchen table and flipped through them. Diane's legal team was not just asking for financial records. They were asking for everything. Request number 4. Produce all text messages, emails, and social media correspondence between Lucy Brooks and Evelyn Brooks for the past 5 years. Request number 7. Produce all medical records, therapy notes, and counseling summaries regarding Lucy Brooks from the year 2020 to present. I stared at the page. Therapy notes. They wanted to know about the anxiety I dealt with after my divorce. They wanted to read my private conversations about feeling overwhelmed at work. I called Nora, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "They can't ask for this," I said. "My therapy records. That has nothing to do with Grandma's will." "They are trying to paint a picture," Nora said, her voice tight. "They want to argue that you were emotionally unstable and dependent on Evelyn. They want to suggest you manipulated her because you needed a savior. It is a fishing expedition. Lucy. They want you to panic. They want you to say, I will pay anything to keep my secrets private. It is disgusting. I said, it is litigation. Nora corrected. We will object to the therapy notes as irrelevant and privileged. We will fight the scope of the emails. But Lucy, you need to be ready. They are going to get some of it, and they are going to twist whatever they find. I hung up and looked around the kitchen. The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap. Every object held a memory, and every memory was being tainted by the legal battle. My phone buzzed again. It was my cousin Hannah. Hannah and I had grown up together, playing hide-and-seek in this very house, but we had drifted apart as adults. She lived 2 towns over and had 2 kids. Can you talk? The text read. It is important. I called her. Hey, I said, Lucy. Hannah's voice was hushed, like she was hiding in a closet. I probably shouldn't be calling you. Mom told me not to. Your mom, Aunt Clara. Yeah. Hannah paused. Listen, I wanted you to know what Diane is doing. We had a family dinner last night. Diane was there. She was crying. Lucy, she told everyone that you forced Evelyn to change the will while she was on pain medication. What I gasped. Grandma wasn't even on pain medication, I know, Hannah said. But Diane was so convincing. She said you threatened to cut Evelyn off from the family if she didn't sign everything over. She said you stole the inheritance because your career in Chicago is failing. My career is fine, I shouted, startling myself. I know, Hannah said again. But Aunt Clara believes her. Uncle Mike believes her. They are all saying you're this greedy city girl who swooped in to rob the family. I wanted you to know what you are walking into. People in town are talking. I felt tears prick my eyes. It wasn't just the money. My mother was systematically dismantling my identity. She was isolating me, just like the lawsuit claimed I had isolated Evelyn. Thank you for telling me. Hannah, I said, my voice thick. Just be careful. Hannah whispered. She is on a warpath. I spent the afternoon pacing the house, feeling the walls closing in. I needed to get out. I needed coffee. I drove to the small cafe on Main Street, the one that rented space in the building I now technically owned. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner, trying to make myself invisible. Excuse me, are you Lucy Brooks? I looked up. Standing over my table was a man who looked like he had just stepped out of a catalog for expensive sailing gear. He was in his 40s, with perfect teeth, sandy hair, and a suit that cost more than my first car. Yes, I said, guarding my coffee cup. Graham Voss, he said, extending a hand. I was a friend of your grandmother's, and a financial consultant for the town council. I hesitated, then shook his hand. It was dry and firm. I was so sorry to hear about Evelyn, he said, slipping into the chair opposite me without asking. She was a remarkable woman. We were working on a very exciting project together before she passed. Oh, I said, yes, the Hollow Creek Arts Initiative. Graham smiled, a dazzling expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Evelyn was very passionate about it. She had verbally pledged a significant donation to help us break ground on the new center. $200,000. I stared at him. $200,000. That was the exact amount my mother had been left in the trust. I did not see any record of a pledge in her papers. I said carefully, well, it was a verbal agreement, Graham said, leaning in. A gentleman's agreement, if you will. She wanted to leave a legacy, I assume, as her heir. You intend to honor her wishes. It would look terrible for the family name if the project fell through because the estate reneged on a promise. The threat was subtle, wrapped in a smile. But it was there. Pay up, or look like a villain. I will have to run everything through my attorney. Mr. Voss, I said, standing up. The estate is currently in probate. Of course, Graham said, remaining seated. But probate can be messy, expensive. Sometimes it is better to handle these small community matters quietly, to keep the goodwill of the town. I walked away, my heart pounding. I called Nora from the car. Who is Graham Voss? I asked. Let me check. Nora said, 5 minutes later, she called back. Stay away from him. Lucy, Graham Voss sits on the board of a nonprofit called the Heritage Fund. Guess who else is on that board? I closed my eyes. Diane's attorney. Exactly, Nora said. And guess who is the primary consultant for the proposed development on the land next to your grandmother's commercial property? Graham Voss. He is not looking for a donation. He is looking for leverage. He is working with your mother's team. It is a coordinated attack, I said, gripping the steering wheel. They are coming at me from every side. I drove back to the house, feeling besieged. I went into the kitchen and made a cup of tea I didn't want. I stared at the wall calendar hanging by the fridge, one of those free ones from the local bank. With pictures of lighthouses, my grandmother used it to track her doctor appointments and garbage pickup days. I had glanced at it a dozen times, but I hadn't really looked at it. I walked over and flipped back to October, the month the will was signed. The handwriting was shaky. October 10th D called, yelling again. Wants the deed. October 12th. Mr. Slate meeting. Finalized draft. October 14th. The entry was written in red ink. Pressed down so hard it indented the paper. Signed it. Done. She is angry. I flipped forward to November. November 5th. D here. Asking about the building. Told her no. Then, on November 20th, a strange entry in all caps. Do not sign. And underneath it, record it. No arguing. I traced the letters with my finger. Record it. She knew. She knew she couldn't win an argument with Diane. She knew her words would be twisted. So she decided to stop arguing and start documenting. The phone rang. It was Nora. We have a problem. She said, Diane's team just demanded an emergency settlement conference. They say they have a proposal that will end the litigation immediately. When I asked, tomorrow morning, and Lucy, they are bringing the heavy artillery. The conference room at Marrow and Slate was neutral ground, but it felt like a battlefield. My mother sat on one side of the long mahogany table, flanked by her attorney, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Gress, and a junior associate. Diane looked tired. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup lighter than usual. She looked like a grieving mother. It was a perfect performance. I sat next to Nora. I wore a navy blazer, trying to look like the pragmatic professional they accused me of being. Mr. Gress started. We are all sensible people here. Diane does not want to drag her mother's name through the mud. She does not want to expose her daughter's difficulties in court. I stiffened. Nora placed a calming hand on my arm. We propose a global settlement. Mr. Gress continued, sliding a document across the table. The estate will be placed into a unified family trust. Diane Brooks will serve as the trustee, ensuring that assets are managed properly. Lucy will receive a generous payout, $500,000, tax-free. The rest will be managed by Diane for the benefit of the family line. I read the document. It was a complete capitulation. I would get a fraction of the estate, and Diane would get control of everything: the house, the investments, the commercial property. This is not a settlement, Nora said, her voice ice cold. This is a surrender. Evelyn's will was clear. Lucy is the sole beneficiary. Diane spoke then. Her voice was soft, trembling. Lucy, please, you do not know how to handle this kind of money. You live in an apartment. You have debt. I can protect this family. I can make sure the money lasts. I looked at her. I saw the woman who had raised me. I remembered her working double shifts at the diner when my father left, coming home with swollen feet, and still making me mac and cheese. I remembered her brushing my hair before prom. I remembered the fierce, protective love she used to have. And I wondered where that woman had gone. Had she always been this person? Had I just been too young to see the greed underneath the sacrifice, Mom? I said quietly, Grandma didn't want you to control the money. She was afraid of you. Diane's face hardened instantly. The grieving mother vanished. The shark returned. Afraid of me? She laughed. She was my mother? I took care of her while you were off playing businesswoman. You think you deserve this? You deserve nothing. The offer is rejected, Nora said, closing the folder. We will see you in court. Mr. Gress leaned forward. If you walk out of here, Ms. Brooks, we will depose your ex-husband. We will depose your boss. We will make sure every mistake you have ever made is read into the public record. We will argue that you are mentally unfit to manage this estate." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Go ahead," I said. "But when you do, ask yourself why Grandma hired a doctor to prove she was sane 3 times before she cut my mother out." I saw Diane flinch. She didn't know about the medical evaluations. We walked out. We went back to Nora's office. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted and hollow. I sat on the leather sofa while Nora set up a tripod and a video camera. "It is time," she said. She placed the sealed envelope from the storage unit on her desk. The red tape was still intact. "For court. Only if challenged. We are recording this opening to establish the chain of custody," Nora said. "State your name and the date. Lucy Brooks. January 30th, 2026. Nora sliced the tape with a letter opener. The sound was loud in the quiet office. She reached inside and pulled out 2 things. First, a letter on the stationery of Marrow and Slate, signed by Mr. Slate himself, to the court. It read, "The enclosed digital drive contains a video statement recorded by Evelyn Brooks on November 20th, 2025. I attest that I was present for the recording, that Evelyn was of sound mind, and that she requested this be sealed and stored off-site, only to be opened in the event of a legal challenge to her will. November 20th. The day the calendar said, 'Record it,' no arguing." Nora reached back into the envelope and pulled out a small, black hard drive. It was enclosed in a clear plastic evidence bag. There was a sticky note attached to the bag in my grandmother's handwriting. I leaned in to read it. "There is a video. Do not show it unless she forces your hand." I looked at Nora. "She has forced my hand," I said. Nora nodded. She plugged the drive into her laptop. "Do you want to watch it?" she asked. I took a deep breath. I was terrified. I was afraid of what I would see. I was afraid of seeing my grandmother alive again, hearing her voice, but mostly, I was afraid of what the truth would do to whatever was left of my relationship with my mother. If I watched this, there was no going back. This wasn't just evidence. It was the end of the family story. "Yes," I said, "play it." The Probate and Family Court of Essex County was a building designed to make you feel small. The ceilings were too high, the benches were too hard, and the air smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat next to Nora Hensley. My hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. Across the aisle, my mother sat with her attorney. Mr. Gress. Diane had transformed since our meeting in the conference room. Gone was the sharp-edged woman who had demanded control of the estate. In her place sat a figure of tragic fragility. She wore a soft gray cardigan that looked slightly too big for her, making her appear shrunken, diminished by grief. She held a tissue in one hand, dabbing occasionally at eyes that I knew were dry. Judge Holloway entered the room. He was a man with a face like a crumpled paper bag and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed. "Mr. Gress stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate movement. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dropping to a register of respectful somberness. "We are here today because a family has been broken. Diane Brooks is not just a disinherited daughter. She is a mother who spent the last decade of her life caring for an aging parent, only to find herself erased from the family legacy in the final, confusing months of Evelyn Brooks' life." I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream that Diane had not cared for Evelyn. She had managed her. There was a difference. Nora's hand touched my arm under the table. It was a firm, grounding pressure. Do not react. She had told me earlier. Credibility over catharsis. If you get angry, you prove their point. If you stay calm, you prove yours. "Mr. Gress continued, pacing slightly before the bench. "We believe that the will presented by the respondent, Ms. Lucy Brooks, does not reflect the true intentions of the deceased. We have reason to believe there is a missing earlier will, one that stood for 10 years. which divided the estate equally. The sudden creation of this new document, mere months before death, suggests an external influence, a coaching. He turned and looked at me. It was a brief glance, but it carried a weight that landed heavy in the room. "We are requesting a retroactive mental capacity review of Evelyn Brooks," Gress said. "We believe the medical records will show a decline in executive function that made her susceptible to suggestion." Diane let out a small, audible sob. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. It was a masterclass in victimhood. Nora stood up. She did not pace. She stood rooted to the spot, a pillar of calm. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and devoid of theatrics, "the allegation of a missing will is irrelevant without the document itself. The will currently in probate was drafted by a reputable firm, signed, witnessed, and notarized. As for the capacity review, the estate welcomes it. We are confident in the findings." The judge looked over his glasses at Diane, then at me. "I will allow the discovery period to continue." Judge Holloway said, "But Mr. Gress, do not bring me theories about missing documents unless you have the paper in your hand. This is a court of law, not a creative writing workshop." We walked out of the courtroom into the bright, harsh light of the hallway. Diane was surrounded by two of her friends, women I had known since childhood, who glared at me as if I were a contagion. My mother looked at me through the gap in their shoulders. Her expression was momentarily stripped of its sorrow. It was blank, assessing. She was checking to see if she had drawn blood. I looked away. I could not give her the satisfaction of seeing the wound. Back at Nora's office, the atmosphere was different. It was the hum of a machine starting to work. "We have them," Nora said, dropping her briefcase onto her desk. I sat down, feeling the adrenaline crash. "How do we have them?" She looked so sympathetic in there. Even I almost felt bad for her. Nora smiled. A sharp, predatory expression. "Gress asked for a capacity review. He just opened the door to the one thing that destroys his case." She walked over to the banker boxes we had retrieved from the storage unit. She pulled out the file labeled Medical Incapacity. "I spent last night going through these." Nora said, "I made some calls. Do you know who Dr. Celine Maris is?" I shook my head. The name was on the file, but I did not know her. "She is not just a doctor," Nora said. "She is a forensic geriatric specialist. She is the person you hire when you want to make sure a will is ironclad. Evelyn did not just go for a checkup. Lucy, she went for a competency certification." Nora opened the file and spread 3 distinct reports across the desk. "Look at the dates," she said. "August, September, October." She went 3 times in the 3 months leading up to the signing of the will. I leaned in. The reports were dense, filled with medical terminology. But the summaries were blunt. Patient demonstrates high-level executive function. Patient articulates clear, consistent rationale for estate distribution. Patient denies any external pressure or coercion. "She built a fortress," I whispered. "She did," Nora agreed. "But why? Why was she so afraid that Diane would challenge her? Most parents assume their children will respect their wishes. Evelyn assumed Diane would go to war. There has to be a specific reason, a trigger event. We need to find the trigger," I said. I spent the next 2 days in the guest room of my grandmother's house, surrounded by the contents of the storage unit boxes. I felt like an archaeologist digging through the strata of a ruined civilization. I read through years of emails. I read receipts for heating oil and grocery delivery. I was looking for a break in the pattern. It was in the box labeled correspondence that I found it. It was a letter from the Briar Glen Community Bank. It was dated July 15th, 2025, 4 months before my grandmother died, and 3 months before she changed her will. "Dear Mrs. Brooks, we are writing to inform you that we have declined the request to refinance the property at 44 Elm Street. The power of attorney document submitted by Diane Brooks on your behalf was flagged by our legal department as outdated and insufficient for a transaction of this magnitude. Per your subsequent phone instruction, We have placed a freeze on all accounts and removed Diane Brooks as an authorized signatory, effective immediately. I stared at the paper. The room seemed to tilt. Diane had tried to refinance the house. She had tried to take a loan out against my grandmother's paid-off home. Behind her back, using an old power of attorney form, I felt a sick lurch in my stomach. This was not just greed. This was theft. This was financial abuse. I grabbed the phone and called Nora. I found it. I said, I found the trigger. I read her the letter. There was a long silence on the other end. That is it, Nora said softly. That is the smoking gun. Evelyn caught her trying to leverage the house. That is why she changed the will. She realized that if she left Diane the estate, Diane would burn through it. She cut her off to save the house, and to save herself. I added, if Diane was willing to do this while Grandma was alive, what would she do when she was gone? I hung up and sat in the silence of the house. I looked around at the walls, the crown molding, the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. My mother had tried to mortgage this safety away. She had tried to turn this home into cash. I needed a drink. I met Tessa Ward at a small bar on the edge of town called the Rusty Anchor. Tessa had been my best friend since kindergarten. She was now a history teacher at the local high school, a woman with wild curly hair and a terrifying ability to detect bullshit. I slid into the booth opposite her and ordered a gin and tonic. You look like you have been haunting a graveyard, Tessa said, taking a sip of her wine. I feel like I'm haunting my own life, I said. I told her about the court hearing. I told her about the medical records. I told her about the refinance attempt. Tessa listened, her eyes narrowing. She grabbed a cocktail napkin and a pen from her purse. Let us map this out, she said. I teach history. Chronology is everything. She drew a line across the napkin. July, she wrote. Bank freezes accounts. Evelyn catches Diane. August, September, October. She wrote next. Evelyn sees doctor. Morris. Evelyn rewrites the will. November. She wrote. Evelyn dies. She looked up at me. When did Diane file the lawsuit? January. I said, 2 weeks after the funeral. Right, Tessa said. But when did she start telling people you were a thief? I thought back. Hannah said she started talking at the funeral. Tessa tapped the pen on the table. Okay, so, Evelyn dies. Diane expects to get everything. Mr. Slate reads the will. Diane gets nothing but the trust. She goes ballistic. She paused, frowning. But here's the thing. Lucy, Diane is broke. Right? That is the whole point. She tried to refinance the house because she needed money. She has maxed out cards. She has a car payment she can't make. Yes, I said. So how is she paying for Gress? I blinked. Gress, mister? Gress. Tessa said. Her lawyer. He is not a strip mall attorney. Lucy. He is a partner at a firm in Boston. His retainer alone would be $25,000. If Diane tried to refinance the house to get cash in July, where did she get the cash to hire a high-powered litigator in January? I stared at the napkin. Tessa was right. It did not add up. Maybe she borrowed it, I suggested. From who? Tessa asked. The family knows she is bad with money. No bank would lend to her. Tessa drew a big question mark on the napkin. Follow the money. Lucy, someone is funding this lawsuit, and whoever it is, they do not care about your grandmother's capacity. They care about the payout. I left the bar with a buzzing in my head that had nothing to do with the gin. The next morning, I called my cousin Hannah again. I need you to be honest with me, I said. Hannah sounded tired. Lucy, I can't get in the middle of this. My mom is already furious that I talked to you. I know, I said, but this is important. Diane hired Mr. Gress. He is expensive. Do you know how she paid him? There was a hesitation on the line, a long, heavy pause. Hannah. She told us she found an investor. Hannah said quietly. An investor, I repeated. For a probate lawsuit. She said a friend helped her. Hannah said, she said this friend understood that injustice had been done and wanted to help her fight for what was right. Who is the friend? I asked. I do not know. Hannah said, but I saw an envelope on her kitchen counter last week. It was a thick envelope, like a courier packet. It had a return address label from a consulting firm. Do you remember the name? I asked, holding my breath. Breyer something, Hannah said. Breyer and Company, or maybe Breyer Group. Breyer and Company Consulting. I said, yeah, that sounds right. I felt a chill go through me. Thank you. Hannah, I said, you just saved me. I called Nora immediately. Breyer and Company Consulting. I said, find out who they are. Give me an hour. Nora said. It took her 40 minutes. When she called back, her voice was tight. You are going to want to sit down. Nora said, I am sitting. Breyer and Company Consulting is a boutique firm based in Providence. Nora said, they specialize in municipal development and commercial zoning. Okay, I said. What does that have to do with my mother? They have a silent partner. Nora said, a managing director who does not appear on the website, but shows up in the state and corporation filings. Let me guess. I said, Graham Voss? Graham Voss? Nora confirmed. I dropped the phone onto the couch cushion and stared at the ceiling. It all clicked into place. The pieces of the puzzle that had looked like family drama suddenly rearranged themselves into a picture of cold, hard commerce. Graham Voss, the charming financial consultant who had approached me at the coffee shop, the man who sat on the board of the nonprofit with Diane's lawyer. He wasn't just a friend of the family, he was a developer. I drove to Nora's office. I needed to see it on paper. Nora had a large map of Hollow Creek spread out on her conference table. It was a zoning map, color-coded by usage. Look here, Nora said, pointing to a red square in the center of town. That is your grandmother's commercial property. She said, 10 Main Street, the coffee shop and the bookstore. I nodded. Now look at the gray areas around it. Nora said, she traced a large block of land surrounding my grandmother's building. This is the old textile mill, she said. It has been abandoned for 20 years, and this is the empty lot behind the post office. Okay, I said. Last month, the town council quietly approved a proposal to rezone this entire district for mixed-use luxury condos and high-end retail. Nora said, it is called the Riverwalk Project. It is a $50 million development. She looked at me. And guess what stands right in the middle of the access road they need to build 10 Main Street? I said, exactly. Nora tapped the red square. Without your grandmother's property, the project is dead. They can't build the access road. They can't get the heavy equipment in. My grandmother owned the linchpin, so Graham Voss wants the building. I said, he needs the building. Nora corrected. He probably approached Evelyn about it last year. And she said no. I realized she would never sell the bookstore. She loved that place. Right, Nora said. Evelyn refused to sell. So Graham needed a new owner, an owner who was desperate for cash, an owner who would sell the moment she got the deed. Diane, I whispered. He is funding the lawsuit, Nora said. He is paying for Gress. He is propping up your mother's fight because if she wins, she gets the building, and she will flip it to him the next day for a fraction of what it is worth just to pay her debts. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. They are using her. I said, he is using my mother's grief and her greed to steal my grandmother's legacy, and your mother is letting him. Nora said, or she is too desperate to see it. This isn't about family. I said, this is a real estate deal. I went back to the house. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody streaks of light across the snow in the yard. I felt a profound sense of isolation. I was fighting a war on two fronts against my mother's emotional manipulation and against a faceless corporation's greed. I walked into the study and turned on the desk lamp. I looked at the boxes of evidence. We had the medical records. We had the bank letter. Now we had the motive. But we still had to prove it in court. We had to prove that the lawsuit itself was an act of bad faith funded by a third party. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message. The number was blocked. I picked it up, my heart starting to race. Your grandmother recorded Diane. Diane knows. She'll do anything to keep it buried. I stared at the screen. The message glowed in the dim light. Diane knows. How How could she know the video was in the storage unit? We had only just found it. Unless Evelyn had told her. I thought back to the calendar entry. November 20th. Recorded. No arguing. Evelyn hadn't just recorded a statement for the court. She had recorded a conversation with Diane, and Diane remembered it. She knew there was a record of what she had done. That was why she had tried to break into the storage unit. That was why she was so desperate to settle before discovery went too deep. She wasn't just fighting for the money. She was fighting to suppress the evidence of her own cruelty. I sat back in the chair, the phone heavy in my hand. The anonymous texter knew about the video, which meant there was someone else inside Diane's circle, or Graham Voss's circle, who was watching. I typed a reply. "Who is this?" The message failed to send. The number was already disconnected. I looked out the window at the darkening street. The shadows stretched long and thin, reaching toward the house like fingers. The video was the key, but playing it would detonate everything. It would expose my mother not just as greedy, but as abusive. It would destroy her reputation in this town forever. And the person who sent the text was warning me Diane would do anything to stop that from happening. I stood up and went to the front door. I locked the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain into place. For the first time since coming home, I was not just sad, I was afraid. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the static of things I could not control. By the 4th week of the lawsuit, I had stopped sleeping. I would lie awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the old window frames. My mind was a loop of legal filings and my mother's accusations. Opportunist, manipulator, thief. The words were in the public record now. Anyone with an internet connection and $5 for the county clerk's fee could read Diane Brooks' detailed description of how her daughter had supposedly defrauded a dying woman. I felt exposed. I felt like I was walking around town with no skin. I called Nora at 3 a.m. once, in a panic. "I want to issue a statement." I told her, my voice cracking, "I want to tell the paper that she is lying. I want to tell them about the refinance attempt. I want to tell them she is being funded by a developer." "Lucy, go to sleep," Nora said. Her voice was groggy but firm. "I can't sleep. Nora, they are destroying my name. If you speak to the press, you look defensive," Nora said. "If you attack her character in public, you look vindictive. We win this in the courtroom, not on Facebook. You hold the line. You keep your dignity. Let her be the one who screams." I hung up, but the dignity felt like a cold comfort. I needed to talk to someone who knew my grandmother not as a saint or a victim, but as a person. I called Joan Lasky. Joan had been in my grandmother's book club for 20 years. They had read everything from historical biographies to trashy romance novels together. Drinking cheap white wine and arguing about the endings, Joan met me at the diner on the edge of town. She was a woman who wore bright purple scarves and laughed with her whole body. But today she looked somber. "I read the article in the Gazette," Joan said, stirring her tea. "Your mother has a vivid imagination. She believes it." I said, "That is the scary part. I think she really believes I stole it." Joan sighed. She looked out the window at the parking lot. "Evelyn talked about you. You know," Joan said. "What did she say?" "She said you were the only one who didn't look at her and see a bank account," Joan said. "She told me about the will. Lucy, a few months before she died, we were talking about King Lear, of all things." I smiled faintly. "A fitting book," she said. "I love Diane. I love her with every bone in my body, but I will not enable her, and I will not leave Lucy defenseless." I felt a lump form in my throat. Defenseless. That was exactly how I felt. "She knew Diane would come after you." Joan continued. "She said Diane had a way of twisting love into a transaction. She wanted to make sure you had a shield. I am trying to use it," I said, "but the shield is getting heavy." The depositions began the following week. This was the part Nora had warned me about, the hours of questioning under oath. Designed to catch you in a lie. I went first. Diane's attorney, Mr. Gress, sat across from me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He asked me about my student loans. He asked me about my rent in Chicago. He asked me if I had ever expressed frustration with my grandmother's stubbornness. He was trying to paint a picture of a desperate, impatient granddaughter. I stayed calm. I answered yes or no. I did not explain. Then it was my mother's turn. We sat in the conference room, the camera recording the red light steady on the table. Diane wore a high-necked blouse and a cross necklace I had never seen her wear before. Nora began the questioning gently. Mrs. Brooks, how often did you visit your mother in the last year of her life? Diane dabbed at her eyes. Every day. I was there every single day. I managed her care. I cooked her meals. I was her lifeline. Nora nodded and made a note. 2 hours later, Nora circled back. Mrs. Brooks, you stated earlier that you were Evelyn's primary caregiver. Did you also maintain full-time employment during this period? Yes, Diane said, sitting up straighter. I have always worked hard. I have a life. You know, I was very busy with my catering business. I was working 60 hours a week. Nora paused. So, you were working 60 hours a week, yet you were also at your mother's house every day. Cooking all her meals, Diane hesitated. Her eyes darted to Mr. Gress. Well, not every meal. I checked on her. I called her. Nora pulled out a document. We have records from the visiting nurse service. Nora said, they indicate that they provided meals 4 days a week because, quote, the daughter is unavailable. Diane flushed. A splotch of red appeared on her neck. The nurses were wrong. She snapped. They didn't see everything. Nora did not argue. She just looked at the camera. The inconsistency hung in the air like smoke. My mother had just claimed to be a martyr and an absentee in the same afternoon. A few days later, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was Graham Voss. I debated not answering. Nora had told me to stay away from him, but curiosity, or perhaps anger, made me unlock the door. I opened it but kept the storm door latched. Mr. Voss, I said, I have nothing to say to you, Lucy. Please, he said. He was wearing a cashmere coat and holding a folder. I am not here to fight. I am here to help you end this. I stared at him. You are funding my mother's lawsuit so you can buy this building for your development. You are not here to help me. Graham's expression didn't change. He didn't deny it. I am a businessman. Lucy, I look for solutions. This lawsuit is ugly. It is going to drag on for years. The legal fees will eat up the estate. Even if you win, you lose. He held up the folder through the glass. I have a proposal. We create a trust. You and Diane split the assets 50-50. I step in as the independent trustee to manage the real estate. Diane drops the suit. You go back to Chicago with $3 million and no more headaches. It sounded perfect. It sounded easy. Just sign the paper, and the nightmare ends. And what happens to the commercial property, I asked. The trust sells it, Graham said smoothly, at fair market value. To you, I asked. To the highest bidder, he said, which happens to be my group. I looked at him. He was handsome, polished, and completely hollow. He was treating my grandmother's legacy like a poker chip. My grandmother didn't want a trust, I said, and she definitely didn't want you managing it. Lucy, be reasonable, he said, his voice dropping. Diane is not going to stop. I can control her. I can make her agree to this. Without me, she will burn this house down just to spite you. She can try, I said. I shut the door and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. He was right about one thing: Diane would not stop. But giving in to him meant handing over exactly what Evelyn had fought to protect. I went back to the task of sorting the house. I needed to feel close to Evelyn, to remind myself why I was doing this. I was in the small office off the kitchen. Going through a stack of accordion files, I found a folder labeled receipts. I assumed it was for household expenses. I opened it. It wasn't utility bills. It was a log of checks written to Diane. January 4th, car repair, $1,000. Loan, March 10th, rent assistance, $2,500. Emergency. June 12th. Medical bill, vet, $800. There were dozens of them. Scraps of paper with my mother's handwriting frantic. Scrawled notes. Mom, I need this. I swear I will pay you back next month. Please. And underneath each note, my grandmother's careful record, not repaid. I flipped through the years. The total was staggering. Tens of thousands of dollars. My mother hadn't just been disinherited. She had already spent her inheritance. She had been draining Evelyn for years. Crisis by crisis. At the back of the folder, slipped between two bank statements, was an envelope. It was not sealed. It was addressed simply Diane. I pulled out the letter inside. The paper was thin. Onion skin stationery. My dearest Diane, I am writing this because I am too much of a coward to say it to your face. I love you. You are my daughter. And I remember the day you were born as the happiest of my life. But I cannot help you anymore. Every time I give you money, I tell myself I am helping you survive, but I am not. I am helping you sink. I am teaching you that there is always a safety net, and you never have to learn to walk on the wire. I am changing my will, not to punish you, but to stop you. If I leave you this money, the wolves will come for you, or you will give it to them. I am leaving it to Lucy because she will hold it. She will keep the house standing. Please, Diane, do not hate her for this. Do not use her as leverage against me. She is the best part of both of us. Let her be. Love, Mom. I sat on the floor, the letter trembling in my hands. I read it again. She is the best part of both of us. I started to cry. Not the angry, frustrated tears of the last few weeks, but deep, racking sobs. I cried for my grandmother, who had made a heartbreaking choice to save her daughter from herself. I cried for my mother, who was so lost in her own chaos, she couldn't see the love in this refusal. She had never sent the letter. She had been too afraid. I wiped my face. This letter was not legal evidence. It wouldn't prove capacity. But it proved love, and it armored me. I wasn't stealing from Diane. I was doing the job Evelyn had hired me to do. The next morning, the blow came. I logged into the estate bank account to pay the electric bill. Access denied. I frowned and tried again. Account frozen. I called the bank. I am sorry. Ms. Brooks, the teller said, we received a court order this morning. A motion to preserve assets filed by the plaintiff. All estate accounts are frozen pending the outcome of the litigation. I hung up and called Nora. She froze the money. I said, I saw the motion. Nora said, her voice tight. It is a standard tactic. Lucy, it is called starving the opponent. She knows she isn't paying her own legal fees because Graham Voss is footing the bill. But she knows you are paying yours. She wants to bleed you dry until you can't afford to keep me. I checked my own savings account. I had enough for maybe 3 months of legal fees if I was careful. After that, I would be broke. She is trying to bankrupt me. I said, we are not going to let her. Nora said, I am filing a counter motion for sanctions. We are going to argue that her discovery requests and this freeze are harassment. And Lucy, it is time to drop the hammer. The hammer. The medical evaluations. Dr. Morris. We are filing them today. 2 days later, we were back in court for a procedural hearing. The mood was different. Judge Holloway looked impatient. He had the stack of motions on his desk. He looked at Mr. Gress. Counselor, the judge said, you have filed a motion to freeze assets based on an allegation of undue influence, yet, Ms. Hensley has just submitted 3 separate competency evaluations conducted by a board-certified specialist in the months prior to the will signing. Mr. Gress stood up, looking slightly less confident. Your Honor, we believe those evaluations were staged. Staged? The judge raised an eyebrow. You are accusing Dr. Morris of malpractice, Mr. Gress hesitated. We are investigating the circumstances. The judge leaned forward. Let me be clear. I am setting a final hearing date for 3 weeks from today. We are going to settle this. And I am warning both sides this is a court of law, not a theater. If you bring me frivolous arguments, I will sanction you. If I find out this lawsuit is being used as a tool for harassment, there will be consequences. He banged the gavel. 3 weeks. We had 3 weeks to prepare for the end. I went back to the storage unit documents. I felt like I was missing something. We had the note from the lockbox item 4 video, and we had the chain of custody letter Nora had found in the first envelope confirming a recording had been made. But where was the actual recording? In part 2, we had found the paperwork for the video, the letter from the attorney confirming it existed, the note from Evelyn. But the physical drive, I realized with a jolt of panic that in the chaos of that day, the emotions, the discovery of the shell company, we hadn't actually confirmed the drive was in the box. We had assumed. I drove back to Nora's office. Nora, the drive. I said, I need to see the physical drive. Nora looked up from her computer. It is in the evidence safe, in the red envelope we took from the box. Can we open it? I asked. The judge said the final hearing is in 3 weeks. We need to know if it works. We need to know what is on it. Nora nodded. You are right. If we are going to play it in court, we need to verify it. She went to the wall safe and spun the dial. She pulled out the red envelope we had taken from the storage unit weeks ago. She cut the seal. She reached in. Her hand felt around. She frowned. She turned the envelope upside down and shook it. A single piece of paper fluttered out. Video file stored on external backup. Drive B. Location. The blue knitting bag. I stared at the paper. The blue knitting bag. My grandmother had a blue floral knitting bag she took everywhere. It was currently sitting in the corner of the living room at the house on Elm Street. I had walked past it 100 times. I thought it was full of yarn. Oh my God. I said, it's at the house. It isn't in the secure storage, Nora asked. Alarmed. She must have moved it. I said, or she forgot to put it in the box, or she wanted it close to her until the end. Go, Nora said. Go get it. Now. I drove home, my heart hammering. If Diane had gotten into the house? If she had looked in that bag? I ran into the living room. The bag was there, dusty and slumped in the corner next to the wing-back chair. I unzipped it. Skeins of gray wool spilled out, knitting needles, a half-finished scarf. I dug to the bottom. My fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. I pulled it out. It was an old, clunky external hard drive, the kind you buy at an office supply store. It was sealed inside a clear plastic evidence sleeve, something she must have gotten from Mr. Slate. Taped to the front of the drive was a label in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. Play only if she sues. I held it in my hands. It was heavy. This was it. This was the voice from the grave. This was the truth that my mother had been trying to bury. The truth that Graham Voss was trying to buy. And the truth that I had been terrified to find. I sat on the floor, holding the drive to my chest, and waited for the courage to plug it in. The external hard drive sat on Nora's desk like a black monolith. It was scratched, the plastic casing worn at the corners, a relic of technology that looked out of place in the sleek, modern office. I stared at the label my grandmother had taped to it. The ink slightly faded, but the command unmistakable. Play only if she sues. Nora closed the blinds, shutting out the gray afternoon light. She plugged the drive into her laptop. A small blue light on the device blinked to life, a rhythmic pulse that matched the thudding of my heart. Are you ready? Nora asked. I was not. I was about to invite a ghost into the room. I was about to hear the voice of the woman who had raised me, the woman whose death had sparked a war that was slowly stripping the flesh from my bones. But I nodded. Yes, I said. Nora clicked the file. The screen filled with the interior of my grandmother's kitchen. The angle was slightly low, as if the camera, likely a laptop or a tablet, had been propped up on a stack of books. The morning sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Evelyn Brooks sat at the table. She was wearing her favorite blue cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons. Her hair was perfectly coiffed. She looked directly into the lens, her expression calm, almost serene. She cleared her throat. My name is Evelyn Rose Brooks. She said, the date is November 20th, 2025. I am recording this statement to explain the decisions I have made regarding my estate. Her voice was clear. There was no tremor, no confusion. She sounded like the librarian she had been for 40 years, authoritative, precise, and kind. I have chosen to leave the bulk of my assets to my granddaughter, Lucy Brooks. She continued, "This is not a decision made in haste. It is not a decision made under duress. It is a decision made to protect what I have built, and to protect my daughter, Diane, from her own worst impulses." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. To hear her say it, so plainly, felt like a physical embrace. "I know Diane will be angry," Evelyn said, looking down at her hands briefly. "I know she will feel betrayed, but I cannot give her control of this money. I have spent the last 10 years watching her drown in debts of her own making. If I give her this estate, it will be gone in 5 years, and she will be destitute. Lucy will keep it safe." Then, the video changed. Evelyn looked up, her eyes shifting to the left, past the camera, her posture stiffened. The serenity vanished, replaced by a steeliness I recognized from the time she had caught me lying as a teenager. "You can come in now." "Diane," she said. My breath hitched. I grabbed the edge of Nora's desk. The frame widened slightly as a figure walked into view. It was my mother. She looked different than she did now. She looked younger, sharper, her energy frantic. She was pacing, her hands moving in agitated circles. "Mom, turn that thing off," Diane said, gesturing toward the camera. "No," Evelyn said calmly. "We are going to talk, and I want a record of it, because I know how you remember things, Diane. You remember them the way you wish they had happened, not the way they did." Diane scoffed, pulling a chair out and sitting down heavily. "This is ridiculous. You are being dramatic. I am being careful," Evelyn said. There was a silence on the recording, thick and tense. Diane leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "Look, Mom," she said, her voice dropping to a persuasive purr. "I looked over the draft, Mr. Slate sent over. It is not right. You know it is not right. It is exactly what I requested." Evelyn said, "It leaves everything to Lucy." Diane exclaimed, her voice rising. "She is a child. She lives in Chicago. She doesn't care about this house. She doesn't care about this town. She will sell it all the minute you are gone. She will not," Evelyn said. "Lucy respects history. You respect cash. That is not fair." Diane spat. "I have business opportunities. Mom, real opportunities. I have people who are interested in the downtown property, serious investors. If we act now, if we leverage the building Evelyn cut her off, there it is," she said. "The investors. Who are they?" "Diane. The men in the shiny suits I saw parked in the driveway last week. They are developers," Diane said, defensive. "They want to revitalize the riverfront. It is a chance to make millions. Mom, but we need capital to buy in. If you just sign the building over to me now, or at least put it in the will so I can borrow against the future value." "No," Evelyn said. Diane slammed her hand on the table. The camera shook. "Why are you so stubborn?" Diane shouted. "I am trying to build a future, and you are handing everything to Lucy. Lucy won't fight for this family. She is soft." "She is not soft," Evelyn said. "She is decent. She is weak," Diane screamed. "She will not fight her own mother in court. You think she will stand up to me if you die and leave this to her? I will take it from her. I will challenge the will, and she will fold. She always folds. She just wants everyone to be happy. She will give me the money just to make me stop yelling." I sat in Nora's office, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. She will not fight her own mother in court. She will fold. My mother had banked on my love for her. She had weaponized my desire for peace. She had looked at my kindness and seen it as a structural weakness to be exploited. Evelyn stared at Diane on the screen. Her face was incredibly sad. "You are right," Evelyn said softly. "Lucy loves you. She hates conflict. That is why I am doing this, to force her to stand up, and to force you to stop feeding on her." "I am not feeding on her," Diane yelled. "You are," Evelyn said. "You treat people like resources. Diane, you treat me like a bank, and Lucy like an emotional crutch. I am closing the bank. Diane stood up. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, cold rage. It was a look I had never seen directed at my grandmother before. You will regret this, Diane said. If you sign that will, I will drag your name through the mud. I will tell everyone you lost your mind. I will tell them Lucy manipulated you. I will make sure the whole town knows that you betrayed your only daughter. I am not betraying you, Evelyn said, her voice steady. I am saving you from yourself. I do not need saving, Diane screamed. I need the deed. She lunged toward the table, as if to grab the camera. The screen went black. The silence in Nora's office was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the laptop fan. Nora exhaled a long, slow breath. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes wide. Well, she said, that is it. I stared at the black screen. I felt numb. That is the end of the case, Nora said. It is everything. Lucy. It proves she knew about the will. It proves she tried to coerce Evelyn to change it. It proves she had a premeditated plan to sue you. And most importantly, it proves she had a financial motive tied to the developers before Evelyn even died. She mentioned the investors. I whispered, she knew about the riverfront project in November. Exactly, Nora said. She was already working with Graham Voss. She promised him the building. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. She said I wouldn't fight her. I said, she said I would fold. Nora looked at me, her expression fierce. But you didn't fold, did you? No, I said. I didn't. Nora tapped the desk. This video is the nuclear option. Lucy, if we play this in court, Diane is done. Not just legally, socially. This shows her abusing an elderly woman. It shows her threatening to destroy her mother's reputation. If the town sees this, she will never be able to show her face in Hollow Creek again. I know, I said, and it will destroy whatever is left of your relationship with her. Nora added gently, there is no coming back from this. If you put this into the public record, you are severing the tie permanently. I thought about the letter I had found. She is the best part of both of us. I thought about the years of holidays, the birthdays, the time she had held me when I was sick. I thought about the woman who had bought me my first suit for a job interview, even though she couldn't afford it. Was I ready to burn all of that? Was I ready to be the daughter who publicly humiliated her mother? She chose this, Nora said, reading my mind. She threatened to drag Evelyn's name through the mud. She is the one who filed the lawsuit. She is the one who called you a thief. You are just holding up a mirror. Lucy. I stood up and walked to the window. I pulled the blind back a fraction. The street below was busy with people going home from work. Normal people, with normal families. Do we have to file it immediately, I asked. We have to list it as evidence for the final hearing. Nora said, we have to provide a copy to the opposing counsel. Once we do that, Gress will see it. He will show it to Diane. And then, Nora said, if Gress has any sense of self-preservation, he will tell her to settle immediately. He will know he can't win. Do it, I said. I drove home in a daze. The image of my mother's face on the screen twisted, angry, predatory, was burned into my retinas. I parked in the driveway of the Victorian house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the porch. I walked up the steps and unlocked the front door. I stopped. The air in the hallway smelled different. It smelled of expensive perfume, Shalimar, my mother's scent. I stepped inside, my heart hammering. Mom, I called out. She walked out of the living room. She was wearing a beige trench coat, belted tightly at the waist. She looked impeccable, composed. The monster from the video was gone, replaced by the grieving daughter. Hello, Lucy, she said. How did you get in? I asked. Gripping my keys like a weapon, I changed the locks. I still have a key to the back garden door, she said. You forgot that one. What do you want? I asked. My voice was steady, but my knees felt like water. She sighed and walked toward me. She stopped a few feet away, invading my personal space. I want to end this. Lucy, she said, I am tired. Are you tired? I am exhausted. I said. Good, she said. Then let us stop. I have a proposal. A real one. No lawyers. Just us. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I will drop the lawsuit, she said. I will withdraw the undue influence claim. I will tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. You keep the house. You keep the investment accounts. You keep the cash. I stared at her. That was nearly $5 million. What is the catch? I asked. No catch, she said, smiling that tight, practiced smile. I just want the commercial property, the building on Main Street. You sign the deed over to me, and I walk away. You keep everything else. It is more than fair. Lucy, you get the lion's share. I just want that one building. It has sentimental value to me. I almost laughed. Sentimental value. She wanted to bulldoze it for Graham Voss. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the desperation behind the smile. She knew she was losing. She knew the medical records were damaging. She didn't know about the video yet. Nora hadn't sent it to Gress, but she could feel the walls closing in. So she was trying one last manipulation. She was trying to trade $5 million for the one thing she had promised her investors. It was the proof I needed. The video was true. The text message was true. It was all a transaction. No, I said. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. No, I repeated. I am not giving you the building. Lucy, don't be stupid, she hissed. I am offering you millions of dollars. I am offering you peace. You are offering me a deal because you are losing. I said, and Grandma didn't want you to have that building. She knew what you wanted to do with it. She knew about the developers. Her face went white. Who told you that? It doesn't matter. I said, I am not signing anything. The estate stays intact, just like she wanted. The mask slipped. The beige trench coat seemed to swell as she drew herself up. The rage I had seen on the video, the rage I had hoped was a one-time aberration, flooded back into her face. You ungrateful little brat, she spat. I made you. I raised you. And you think you can stand there and deny me what is mine. It is not yours. Mom, I said quietly. She took a step closer. Her eyes were black holes. If you do not sign that paper, Lucy, I will destroy you. You think the lawsuit is bad? I will make sure everyone in this town knows what you are. I will tell them about your divorce. I will tell them about your panic attacks. I will tell them you are unstable. I will make sure you never work in this state again. I stood my ground. I felt the fear. Yes. But I also felt the ghost of my grandmother standing beside me, her hand on my shoulder. She will fold. Diane had said, not today. Get out, I said. Diane stared at me. She looked shocked. For the first time in my life, I wasn't retreating. She sneered. You will regret this. You will be begging me to settle by next week. She turned and marched out the door, slamming it so hard the glass pane rattled. I locked the door. Then I went to the back garden door and nailed it shut with a piece of scrap wood and 3 heavy nails. I called Nora. Send it, I said. Send the video to Gress. The next 3 days were a blur of legal maneuvering. Nora filed the supplemental evidence list. She formally submitted the video file, the chain of custody affidavit, and a motion to admit the recording as a rebuttal to the undue influence claim. We expected a phone call. We expected Gress to call Nora in a panic, begging for a settlement conference. The phone did not ring. Maybe Gress hasn't watched it yet. I said on the second day, he watched it. Nora said grimly. The read receipt on the email was triggered 10 minutes after I sent it. So why aren't they folding? Because Diane won't let him. Nora said, she is doubling down. She is probably telling him the video is a fake, or that she was provoked. She is in denial. Lucy, she thinks she can talk her way out of it on the stand. Then we go to trial. I said, the final hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m, the night before. I was at the house, packing up the files. I needed to bring the original physical evidence to court, the hard drive, the knitting bag, the letters. I was going through the banker box from the storage unit one last time, making sure everything was in order. I lifted out the file with the medical records. Underneath it, stuck to the bottom of the box, was a thin blue folder I hadn't noticed before. It had been pressed flat against the cardboard. I pulled it out. It was not labeled. I opened it. Inside was a legal document. It was a draft complaint, written in legal format but unsigned. Plaintiff Evelyn Rose Brooks, Defendant Breyer and Company Consulting, Graham Voss, and John Doe's 1 to 10. I scanned the document. My grandmother hadn't just been hiding from the developers, she had been preparing to sue them. The complaint alleged harassment, trespassing, and predatory practices. It detailed how Graham Voss had come to her house repeatedly after being asked to leave. It detailed phone calls at all hours. It detailed threats to use municipal code violations to condemn the property if she didn't sell. My blood ran cold. Graham Voss hadn't just charmed her. He had stalked her, and my mother was working with him. I turned the page. There was a handwritten note clipped to the back of the draft. It was in Evelyn's writing, but the ink was shaky, as if she had written it in bed. Lucy, if you are reading this, I am gone. I didn't file this suit because I was too tired, and I didn't want the stress to kill me faster. But you need to know who these men are. They want the water rights. It is not just about the condos. The deed to our building includes the old mill sluice rights. That is what they are really after. They need it for the drainage system of their whole development. Do not sell. Make them pay for every inch. And be careful. If they can't buy it, and they can't steal it through Diane, they will come back in a different suit. They will sue the estate for something else. Be ready. I lowered the paper. The water rights. It was always about something deeper. Something invisible. I looked at the clock. It was 11 at night. The hearing was in 10 hours. I realized then that the video was not just about my mother. It was about exposing a conspiracy. Diane was just a pawn, a willing, greedy pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. I put the blue folder into my briefcase. I turned off the lights in the kitchen. The house felt big and silent around me. I walked upstairs to my bedroom. I laid out my clothes for court. A dark blue suit, a white blouse, armor. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my mother's threat. I will make sure everyone knows what you are. Tomorrow, everyone would know what she was. And I realized, with a heavy, final clarity, that winning didn't mean fixing anything. Winning just meant surviving the truth. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. I lay there, listening to the old house breathe, waiting for the sun to rise on the day I would dismantle my family. The morning of the final hearing was cold. The kind of New England cold that settles in the marrow of your bones and refuses to leave. I parked my car 3 blocks away from the Essex County Probate and Family Court to avoid the press. The local paper had picked up the story, framing it as a sensational battle over a historic estate, and I had no desire to have a microphone shoved in my face before I had even had my coffee. When I walked up the granite steps, the hallway was already packed. It seemed that half of Hollow Creek had decided to take the day off work to watch the Brooks family destroy itself. I saw neighbors who had known me since I was in pigtails. I saw the owner of the bakery. I saw my cousins, huddled in a tight circle, whispering, and I saw my mother. Diane stood near the double doors of the courtroom, surrounded by her legal team. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a navy suit that was conservative and respectful. Her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like a woman holding herself together by sheer force of will. She saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine. There was no warmth in them, no maternal recognition. There was only assessment. She was calculating my stress levels, looking for cracks in the armor. I looked away. I walked past her, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and found Nora Hensley. "Ready?" Nora asked. She looked formidable in a charcoal suit, clutching the hard drive in its plastic evidence bag like a grenade. "I am ready to be done," I said. We entered the courtroom. The air was heavy, recycled, and smelled of wet wool and floor wax. Judge Holloway took the bench at 9 o'clock sharp. He looked at the packed gallery, his expression sour. "This is a probate hearing, not a spectator sport," he grumbled. "I will have order. If there is a single outburst, I will clear the room. Mr. Gress, Diane's attorney, called his first witness. I called Diane Brooks to the stand. My mother walked to the witness box. She took the oath with a trembling hand, her voice soft and wavering. She sat down and looked at the judge with wide, tearful eyes. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Gress began, his voice gentle. Tell the court about your relationship with your mother, Evelyn Brooks. Diane took a deep breath. She was my best friend, she said. I dedicated my life to her when my father died. I moved back to Hollow Creek to be near her. I drove her to every appointment. I cooked for her. I managed her medications. And in the final months, Mr. Gress asked, did you notice a change? Diane nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She became confused, paranoid. She started forgetting things. She would forget that I had just visited her. She would call me and accuse me of hiding things. It was heartbreaking to watch. And during this time, Mr. Gress continued, what was the role of the defendant? Lucy Brooks. Diane looked at me then. It was a look of profound pity. Lucy was in Chicago, Diane said. She was very busy with her career. She didn't have time for us, but then she started calling. She started coming down on weekends. Suddenly, she was very interested in Mother's finances. Objection, Nora said calmly. Speculation. Sustained. The judge said, stick to the facts. Mrs. Brooks. Diane adjusted her scarf. The facts are that my mother was vulnerable. She was scared. And Lucy told her that I was trying to control her. Lucy poisoned her against me. She used my mother's confusion to rewrite a lifetime of love. Mr. Gress leaned in. Do you believe the will presented to this court reflects your mother's true wishes? No. Diane sobbed. My mother would never cut me out. She knew I depended on the estate to maintain the family home. This will is a mistake. It is a product of manipulation. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Gress said. The courtroom was silent. I could feel the eyes of the gallery on me. I could feel their judgment. How could a daughter do that? How could she steal from her own mother? Nora stood up. She picked up a stack of documents and walked to the podium. She did not look sympathetic. She looked like a surgeon picking up a scalpel. Mrs. Brooks, Nora began. You stated that you were Evelyn's primary caregiver. Yes, Diane said, wiping her eyes. And you stated she was confused and paranoid in the final months of her life. Yes, very confused. Nora held up a piece of paper. This is a letter from the Briar Glen Community Bank, dated July 15th, 2025, 4 months before Evelyn died. Diane stiffened. Are you familiar with this document? Nora asked. I do not recall every piece of mail, Diane said. Allow me to refresh your memory, Nora said. This letter informs Evelyn Brooks that a request to refinance her home, a home that was fully paid off, was denied. The bank denied it because the power of attorney form submitted with the application was outdated and invalid. Nora paused, letting the words hang in the air. Mrs. Brooks, did you attempt to take out a mortgage on your mother's home without her knowledge? Diane shifted in her seat. I was looking into options. For repairs. The roof needed work. The roof was replaced in 2024, Nora said, glancing at a receipt. Lucy paid for it. Diane flushed. There were other repairs I was trying to help her. By using an invalid legal document to access $300,000 of equity, Nora asked. I had power of attorney, Diane snapped. Not for real estate transactions, Nora said. And according to this letter, once Evelyn found out, she froze your access to all accounts. Is that the behavior of a confused woman, Mrs. Brooks? Or is it the behavior of a woman protecting herself from theft? I did not steal anything, Diane shouted. It was my inheritance. It was going to be mine anyway. Nora did not smile, but the energy in the room shifted. Diane had just admitted she viewed the money as hers before Evelyn was even dead. Let us move on, Nora said. You testified that you are financially destitute and that this disinheritance ruins you. Yes, Diane said, recovering her composure. I have nothing. Then can you explain to the court how you have paid the retainer for Mr. Gress's firm, Mr. Gress stood up. Objection. Attorney-client privilege. I am not asking about their conversations, Nora said. I am asking about the source of funds. We have reason to believe the plaintiff is being funded by a third party with a vested interest in the estate's assets. Overruled, the judge said. Answer the question. Diane looked trapped. A friend helped me. Alone. Nora held up another document. We have a record of a wire transfer to Gress and Associates from Breyer and Company Consulting. Is that your friend? Mrs. Brooks, I do not know the details of the transfer. Diane stammered. Breyer and Company is a firm managed by Graham Voss. Nora said, Is it true that Mr. Voss is a developer involved in the Riverwalk project, a project that requires the acquisition of the commercial property at 10 Main Street? Diane looked at the judge, then at Gress. I do not see what this has to do with my mother's capacity. It goes to motive, Nora said sharply. You are not suing because you are a grieving daughter. You are suing because you promised a building you did not own to a developer, and you need the deed to pay your debts. That is a lie, Diane screamed. Nora walked back to the table. She picked up the plastic evidence bag. Your Honor, Nora said, to settle the question of Evelyn Brooks's capacity and intent. The defense moves to admit Exhibit D, a digital video recording made by the deceased on November 20th, 2025. Mr. Gress shot out of his chair. Objection. We have not authenticated this video. This is a surprise piece of evidence. We have not had time to review it properly. You received the file 3 days ago. Counselor, the judge said, and the affidavit from the deceased's attorney. Mr. Slate establishes the chain of custody. He was present when it was recorded. But, Your Honor. Gress began. Overruled, the judge said. Play the video. Nora plugged the drive into the court's AV system. A large screen dropped down from the ceiling. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. I looked at Diane. She was pale, her hands gripping the railing of the witness box so hard her knuckles were white. She knew. She remembered. The video flickered to life. My grandmother's kitchen appeared, bright and sunny, a stark contrast to the wood-paneled gloom of the courtroom. Evelyn sat at the table, wearing her blue cardigan. My name is Evelyn Rose Brooks, she said. The sound of her voice filled the room. A collective gasp went through the gallery. It was like she was in the room with us. Evelyn explained her decision. She spoke of her love for Diane, but also her fear. She spoke of the debts. She spoke of the need to protect the house. Then, she looked past the camera. You can come in now. Diane, on the witness stand. The real Diane closed her eyes. On the screen, the younger Diane walked into the frame. The tension was palpable. The audience watched, mesmerized, as the argument unfolded. They heard Diane ridicule her mother. You are being dramatic. They heard Diane demean me. She is soft. She is weak. She will not fight her own mother in court. I kept my head high, staring straight ahead. I was not soft. I was the one playing the video. Then came the pivot. The moment the room stopped breathing, the investors. Evelyn said on screen. Who are they? Diane. They are developers, the on-screen Diane said, her voice dripping with greed. They want to revitalize the riverfront. It is a chance to make millions. Mom. And then the threat that had hung over me for months. If you die and leave this to her, I will take it from her. I will challenge the will, and she will fold. She always folds. I will drag your name through the mud. I will tell everyone you lost your mind. The video ended with Diane lunging for the camera. The screen went black. The lights in the courtroom came back on. The silence was deafening. It was a physical weight. Every person in that room, the neighbors, the cousins, the reporters, was staring at Diane. She had been stripped bare. Her grief was exposed as performance. Her outrage was exposed as strategy. And her motive was laid out in her own voice, millions of dollars from a developer. Diane stood up in the witness box. She looked wild, cornered. She provoked me, Diane shouted, her voice shrill. She cut the video. That is not how it happened. You are under oath. Mrs. Brooks, the judge said, his voice like thunder. Diane looked at Mr. Gress. Fix this. Do something, Mr. Gress looked down at his papers. He was a professional. He knew when a ship had sunk. He wasn't going to go down with it. Your Honor, Gress began. We would request a recess to confer with my client regarding— No, Diane interrupted. She looked at the gallery. She saw the faces of her friends, the people she had lied to for months. They looked horrified. She saw the reporter scribbling furiously in his notebook. She realized, in that split second, that she had lost more than the money. She had lost the town. And if she kept fighting, if she let Nora cross-examine her on the video, on the water rights, on the harassment, she would lose her freedom. I want to stop, Diane said. Mr. Gress looked at her. Mrs. Brooks, stop it, she said, her voice shaking. I withdraw the petition. I withdraw the claim. Diane looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a toxic mix of hatred and humiliation. Drop everything, she said. I am done. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Are you stating for the record that you are withdrawing your contest to the will with prejudice, the judge asked, meaning you cannot refile this suit? Yes, Diane screamed. Just turn it off. Let me leave. The judge banged his gavel. The petition is withdrawn. Judge Holloway said, The last will and testament of Evelyn Rose Brooks is hereby admitted to probate as valid and binding. The freeze on the estate assets is lifted immediately. He paused, looking down at Diane over his spectacles. Mrs. Brooks, he said, you are fortunate that your daughter has not filed criminal charges for the attempted use of an invalid power of attorney. However, based on the testimony regarding the financing of this litigation and the attempted coercion of the deceased, I am referring the transcript of these proceedings to the district attorney's office for review regarding potential fraud and elder abuse. Diane went white. Court is adjourned. The judge said. Diane scrambled out of the witness box. She pushed past her lawyer. She pushed past the bailiff. She ran down the center aisle, shielding her face with her purse as the cameras flashed. I sat in my chair. I couldn't move. It is over, Nora said softly. You did it. Lucy. I looked at the black screen where my grandmother's face had been. Thank you, Grandma, I whispered. We walked out of the courthouse 15 minutes later. The air outside was still cold, but the sun had broken through the clouds. The reporters were gathered at the bottom of the steps, waiting for a statement. I didn't want to give one. I just wanted to go home. But Diane was there. She was standing near the parking lot, arguing with Mr. Gress. He was walking away from her, getting into his car and driving off. He had likely just fired her as a client. She saw me coming down the steps. She waited. Nora moved to step in between us, but I touched her arm. It is okay, I said. I walked up to my mother. She looked smaller than she had in the courtroom. The facade had cracked, and what was underneath was jagged and raw. Are you happy? She asked. Her voice was brittle. You destroyed me in there. You destroyed yourself. Mom, I said, you filed the suit. You made the threats. I did what I had to do, she snapped. Her eyes flashed with that familiar, desperate defiance. You do not understand business. Lucy, that building is a gold mine. The water rights alone are worth a fortune. We could have been set for life. We, I asked, or you? It is the same thing, she said. It is family. No. I said, it isn't. I looked at her, and I finally understood what Joan Lasky had meant. I understood what my grandmother had meant. My mother did not know how to love without a price tag. To her, people were assets. Relationships were leverage. And the tragedy wasn't that she had lost the money. The tragedy was that she genuinely believed she was the victim because her transaction had failed. She was incapable of seeing the wreckage she had caused because she was only looking at the ledger. I can't fix you, I said. What? She frowned. I spent my whole life trying to be good enough so you wouldn't be angry. I said, I spent my whole life trying to fix whatever was broken inside you so you could be a mother. But I can't. Grandma couldn't. I reached into my bag and pulled out the blue folder the draft complaint Evelyn had written against Graham Voss. Here, I said. What is this? Diane asked. It is the lawsuit Grandma was going to file against your partner. I said, for harassment. I am not going to file it. I am done with courts. But you should know who you got into bed with. She took the folder, looking confused. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I turned and walked away. Lucy, she called after me. You can't just leave. What about the house? What about the trust? I kept walking. I walked to my car. I got in and closed the door. Shutting out the sound of her voice, I sat there for a moment, watching the wind whip the bare branches of the trees. I had the house. I had the money. I had the truth. I was an orphan now, in every way that mattered. But as I started the engine and drove away from the courthouse, leaving my mother standing alone on the pavement, I realized something else. I was free. Thank you for listening to this story. Writing Lucy's journey from the shock of the funeral to the final confrontation in the courtroom has been an intense emotional ride. It is a story about the painful realization that sometimes the only way to protect your legacy is to break the bonds that hold you back. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Do you think Lucy made the right choice by walking away? Or should she have tried to help Diane one last time? Please leave a comment below and let me know where you are listening from. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of family secrets, betrayal, and justice. Don't forget to share your own thoughts in English in the comments section. Until next time.